So excited to chat about this today. So, what we want to talk to you guys about is if you noticed our post that kind of announced this live, I was just telling them very, very briefly before we started that we have something that we're creating that surrounds this that we want to chat about. And that when you and I get together and talk, it's always just so opening and nourishing and grounding and expansive. And that's what we want to invite people into, because when we talk about this concept of freedom, this is something that you and I have talked about so many times, right? Like
Yeah.
accessing and desiring freedom in our lives and taking steps to actualize that. And I think that, I mean, we've obviously learned a ton along the way and continue to. And that's what I think is so important, is really recognizing, what does freedom mean to you, right? Like, how do you define it? What does that look like in your life? Because I think that when we are seeking freedom, when we're searching for freedom, we're trying to actualize it. What we're forgetting is that freedom is a frequency and that we actually get to access it at any moment of any day. And so I would love to start this just by asking you, you know, how this resonates for you. Like, what is coming up for you today when we talk about this freedom concept?
Yeah. I was so excited to be here with you on a call. It's just one of my favorite things to do, you know? So I love that I get to work because it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
like work with you. Um, as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking about something that just happened and how I would have how I would have reacted to it so much differently before than I did now. And I think that is like, I think sometimes we're looking for freedom in like such big things, but it can happen in like what seem to be small things. But when you have enough of those small things that are like that you're allowing your energy to be sucked into, that's where a lot of your energy, that's where a lot of your spaciousness, which I love, it's a word that you use and now I've adopted it. It's like it just sucks it out of you and you don't feel free. You feel constrained, you feel trapped, you feel anxious. And I think that if we don't know what freedom is, we can start thinking about what it isn't. You know,
Mm.
freedom isn't, for me, what isn't freedom? It's doing something that I don't enjoy doing. And
Mm.
I think I've gotten to the point in my life where I even have fun like loading up the dishwasher because I'm so grateful that I don't have to wash it by hand. Like here in Portugal and in Mexico, it's like so common for people to wash dishes by hand. And I just appreciate that so much. So to me, even that is freedom. That
Mm.
I have to spend my time doing something that's so like it just really annoys the fuck out of me. I
Mm.
find no joy in that. And so I found a way because I really had this desire of like, I want to have a life that feels really free. I felt like all of that just kept coming into place. And so I know that that was like a long-winded answer, but I wanted to give people just some tangible, I guess, perceptions or things that maybe feel quite relatable because when when we don't feel free is because we are allowing circumstances, people, situations have the energy that are being required for other things. And they don't have to be grand things, but for other things in our life that make us feel good. So I
Yeah, and
think,
I think I want to piggyback on what you said a little bit, because you were talking about, you don't like to do things that are kind of right, and that don't make you feel free. But then I think about it and I'm like, okay, there are a lot of people out there who are doing things that feel that way to them.
uh,
And sometimes they feel kind of trapped in that or stuck in that. And I think that also sometimes there are things that are currently in people's lives as kind of stepping stones or bridges
yes,
into accessing a higher level of freedom as well. And
yeah,
so I think it's also recognizing that in those moments, one of two things: you can, like you said, find a gratitude within it, obviously, and really call in that frequency of freedom. And what does that mean? It's like really tapping into, you know, being just with yourself, recognizing that you have control over how you feel in that moment, that you can shift your perspective on this in terms of, I'm so grateful that I have this opportunity to, you know, continue to prepare myself for what's arriving, to, you know, I'm so excited about what's coming. And I think also in that, it's recognizing that no matter what you're doing, it is of service to whatever you're
Yeah.
being drawn into, right? Like as you're in relationship with yourself. And so I think that's important too, because the fact is there are going to be some things, like there's some things that I do in my business that I'm like, right?
Yeah.
That are just like back end things that are not my favorite things to do. But I also have learned how to shift that into a reverence, right? Like I am in service of my business,
Yeah.
which is in service of the collective, which is in service of source, right? And so for me, it's really being able to recognize the freedom that exists within whatever circumstance as well.
Yeah. And I'm so glad that you brought that up because I think that a lot of times what we're really experiencing is the resistance
Mm,
to create spaciousness in our lives. So I don't know about you, but sometimes when I know that I have a lot of things to do for the business and I don't do it, it's still there.
right.
It's still on me, right? So how can I create more freedom for myself? I can move through the resistance of doing that thing that I don't want to do, and then I have more space. So freedom can be like, I think it really is like it's like a vibe. It really is like, it really is like something that you get to choose and decide and step into, even though it may feel at times that it's not freedom. But then
Mm.
once you move through the resistance, you're like, huh, like why was I resisting this the whole time? And now it's like I don't
I
have that
love this.
burden.
I love this because you're talking about this in like concrete terms, right? Like grounded terms of like, yeah, like once I move through that, it offers me freedom. And for me, like I'm coming like from this energetic perspective right now as you're talking of like, yeah, when I'm feeling that resistance, I've learned from my own energy, and this is just the way that I do things, right? Not to push through, but instead to pause, right? To be present with that resistance,
Mm.
to kind of call in source and to just really recognize that like where that there's something within that for me,
Yeah.
right? This is for me, and
Yeah.
allowing it to be for me and allowing it to kind of show me where it's for me. And in that, it kind of flows me into it. So it's like I'm just allowing the movement of that energy to guide me. And it was interesting because I pulled a card before this live just
Mm.
to see, you know, like what was the intention for this live. And we got the knowledge card. And the knowledge card, as I was feeling into this, obviously it's a big book with symbols on it. So, of course, it brings me to the Akashic Records because that's the place that I work in, of course. But what it was telling, the message that I kind of got from this is this recognition, too, that there's what we just talked about, like you're using examples that are coming up for you right now of how freedom is present for you right now and how it's speaking through you. And so am I. But the fact is that as we stay in touch with ourselves and as we listen to these kinds of things that you and I are talking about today and receive them and let them land as they're meant for whoever's listening, we get to recognize that new layers of the texture of freedom and what that looks like and feels like and is in our
Mhm.
lives is different depending on the day, depending on the week, depending on our growth space, you know what I mean? So I think that was a really interesting piece too that came forward, is to recognize that, you know, it's not like you define freedom or you access it and it's like check done, right? It's an
Yeah.
unfolding, like we're continuing to be in relationship with this.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I feel like the more I dive into what something means to me, it's like I'm just like, oh my gosh, I cannot define every single word all the time because every word is so like it's like a wormhole
Yeah.
of its own. you
Yeah.
know? Once you think you've got down freedom, it's like, oh, but I feel really free, like going to the park and sitting, in the sun and relaxing into a tree. Like this feels like freedom to me. And sometimes it's like, oh, it's 2 p.m. I can go to the grocery store right now and there's way less people than at 6 p.m., whatever, right? Like I feel like if you I'm someone who is always asking for evidence, right? Like I'm a very like I want to see this for me. Like I have this delusion. Show me that it's there. Show me that it's
Mm-hmm.
attainable for me. And I feel like the more I just own, like you know what, sometimes when it doesn't feel like things are working out for me, I choose to believe that they are, and that
Yeah.
gives me freedom to go on with my day. That gives me spaciousness to set up a coffee date or plan whatever I want, So I think it's really coming down to what is freedom to you? Like
Mm-hmm.
you were asking at the beginning of this live, right? It's like we've been told what freedom is. We've actually even been taught to fear freedom. So
Mm-hmm.
what is the definition of freedom that feels in alignment with you, that feels like it's in integrity with who you are in this moment, knowing that the definition will evolve just as you do?
Yeah, and I love that too, that you brought up a good point about, you're feeling freedom leaning against a tree, you're feeling freedom at the grocery store, whatever it is. The context and the meaning of like, why do I feel freedom? And what does, like you said, you can go down a wormhole around what, defining and a word or understanding with your mind. And that's not the idea. The idea is to be in recognition of the feeling when it
Yeah.
comes up and being in presence with it and allowing that to become something that you choose to spend more time in, to that you choose to
Yeah.
choose, right? Like I'm deciding to choose this, to choose experiences that make me feel that way. And I'm also choosing to be in like extended presence with that feeling when it comes for like, yes, this is what I have decided for
Yeah.
myself. And we get to claim it.
Mm.
We really get to claim it. And when we do that in those little decisions you're talking about, right? When we do it from a concrete space, when we do it from even a heart centered, like, just vibrational space, whether we're in meditation or we're in presence with it with source, like I was saying, either any of those examples, it doesn't matter the context or what we're talking about. What matters is that you're choosing to be in presence with it. You're choosing to be in relationship with it. And as that builds, it will continue to show up in new ways in your life. And as you keep your awareness open and you've decided very convictedly, this is my intention, right? I know I desire this. I'm claiming that I desire this sensation of freedom and that I want more of it in my life.
Mhm.
More of it will show up. I mean, it's just like I used to say, I've been a therapist for 20 years, and I remember that when I transitioned from my traditional therapy business to doing more of my spiritual healing work, I was like, I don't have enough time. I have so many clients. My schedule's so booked. Da, 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 da. And
Yeah.
I recognized it was so counterintuitive to me at the time that when I would open up, 2 minutes of space,
Mhm.
5 minutes of space, 10 minutes would just show up somewhere else. 15 minutes would show, right. And I was like, oh, this is a fascinating like it was so counterintuitive to like how my brain worked because I was so
Yeah.
linear, you know? And that's kind of the same thing we're talking about here. It's like you open it up and you taste it and you choose to be with it and you decide, and then more and more of this freedom will just start to show up and you'll be surprised. That's why it's
Mm.
new levels of freedom will be unlocked as you commit to this, as you devote to this, because you're going to have areas of freedom that you didn't even know were available to you.
Yeah. And there is this, what's this quote that says, if you don't have time to meditate, you need to meditate. Like that's, that sort of thing is like the
Mm-hmm.
thing that you say that you don't have time for. That's the thing that you probably need the most.
Mm-hmm.
I love that because even against all the odds of that your brain is launching at you, you're like, let me make some space. And then it's like, oh, you want some more of this, Laura? And you're saying, yes. Okay, let me give you more of that. And more space is created, more space is created. So this actually was something that I wanted to say before we reveal the why of live, because otherwise you and I are like 3 hours here, like, oh.
I know, I know, I know. Let's keep it
Um,
digestible.
um, but I was thinking of like, for me, I think right now the freedom, the vibe of within the freedom for me is choosing to give myself the benefit of the doubt and leave the story behind. So if I have a story around, I don't know, I'm just gonna make some shit up. I'm really bad at math, which is actually real. What if I stop telling myself that story and create a new one? Not like I'm the best at math, because obviously my brain's like, bitch, come on, like that's not true. But something that just feels like, you know what? I was told that I wasn't smart, or I was made to believe that I wasn't smart. I was made to believe that I wasn't bad at math. But in reality, that's what I like, that's the sound that came into my ear, processed by my body, anchored into my body as a belief. And that's when I put on the glasses of I'm bad at math. And so I choose, to me, freedom is going like this. I'm taking off the glasses. I'm taking off the glasses that hold the stories that no longer serve me. That is my current relationship, my current meaning for freedom at the moment.
Yeah, I love that so much, because when you talk about that, it just makes me think, for me, it feels like a heart opening and like a softening. And I think that for me is, I think a lot of that has to do with my business and my service.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and you and I have talked about this, it's just my own history and my own family, just with the devotion and the grind to work, and feeling like, oh my gosh, am I following this same trajectory, and then I'm, not being present with my loved ones, and it's like, that's not my story at all, actually,
Oh,
right? And so in a similar way, it's dropping the narrative, but I think that from a more like palpable sensation, like we hold these codes in our body, right? It's being able to just like not feel that, like when I feel that constriction coming in around any of that, it's like I know I'm being called to open. I know that making this my intention is something that opens me. It opens me, it opens my heart, it opens other people. It's deep medicine,
yeah.
right? And so I think it's being able to be in presence for me as well, in presence with where I'm being drawn, rather than the things outside of me that I then start to constrict around, or the stories in my mind that are either triggered by things outside of me or naturally come up because of my history. Sherry is saying, by simply setting the intention of expansion last year, it opened up so much space for me, even when I didn't realize it,
Yeah.
and allowed me more freedom throughout I'm really glad you said
Yeah.
that, because that's why I like the 2025 intentions. Like, I don't do goal
Yeah.
setting or,
Same.
resolutions, anything like that, but I set an intention. My word this year is fueled. Um, and really remembering that source is my center, right? That this is coming from a different space, not just from me. And it's just wild how, when we have that like guidepost, that anchor point to keep coming back to,
Mm-hmm.
it's like that tether, so that our kite can like fly wider and higher, and
Mm-hmm.
not feel, as unruly.
Yeah. Yeah. I love
Wow,
that. I love
it's
that.
beautiful.
Yeah.
So you want to tell everybody what we're doing?
Yes, I want to tell. Um, so Laura and I are launching a podcast.
We're doing a podcast series. It's called The Freedom Frequency. And we've already recorded a few episodes. The first one is going to launch on the day before the new moon next week, so January
Mm-hmm.
28th. And we're going to be releasing new episodes every other week on Tuesdays. And it just feels so opening and so good and so real,
Mm-hmm.
because it's Anna and I showing up in conversation around, where this frequency of freedom is speaking through us at the time. And already we have 3 episodes that are very different. Yet
Yeah.
yet you'll feel also like the different textures of freedom within these episodes. Like, sometimes freedom feels like being snuggled up and taking a nap, and sometimes freedom feels like, running through the fields with your arms wide open. So I think that that's what you'll get from that, is being able to feel the different sensations of freedom and how it's showing up, and where you can access this concretely. Because yes, we talk about it as a frequency and we know it's a vibration, but the fact is we're human
Yeah.
beings, and we want to ground this into the day-to-day human experience and relationships and choices and boundaries, and what makes you you.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm so excited. I like, this is one of the projects that I'm just like, I'm so grateful, and I'm so excited that you said yes, because I told you this, that I've just been wanting us to do something, because the truth is I like spending time with people that I love, and
Mm-hmm.
I love you, and I love that we can talk about anything. And so it's almost like we're kind of letting people be like
Mm-hmm.
in like a back, behind the scenes, like, like in our conversations, or just like sitting there, we're on your phone or on your computer, wherever you listen to the podcast, and it's like you're kind of eavesdropping on our conversation, because this is like shit that we're always talking about. Like, even when we first connect, like, what do you want to talk about today? We'll just start going, and it's like, okay, let's start recording, because this is like,
Yeah.
you
Well, and
know.
I think that's beautiful too. What you just said is witnessing the raw nature of like a genuine, open, conscious
Yeah.
relationship and connection, and how much freedom extends from there. For each of us,
Mhm.
for the freedom itself, or for the relationship itself. And so I think also just inviting people into what that feels
Yeah.
like, what that feels like, and what that, it's just, it's wild, because one of the things that people have always said about me is that I say a lot of things that people think that they they don't say out loud,
They
and
don't
you're
say
the
out loud.
same way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're the same way. And
Yeah.
so I think that it's what that catalyzes in other people is almost permission for them to do the same,
Yes.
to become more of themselves. So, Sherry, we are going to have this on YouTube in addition to, it's going to be on my podcast, my podcast platform, the Akashic Musings podcast, which is on Spotify and Apple. And so you can find the podcast episodes there if you're on Spotify or Apple. And you can also find it on YouTube, because we'll be uploading the first video. But I will tell you, I didn't realize we were going to do it on video the first time. So I have no idea what I look like on the first video.
You look
I was like,
great.
Anna, I'm so
You look
scared.
great.
I was like, wait, we're doing this on video too? Oh no.
Like,
I know.
oh,
Who knows what I
oh
look like on that
no.
first one, guys, but raw and real. That's what we're here
Yeah.
for.
I mean, I'm honestly not. I mean, if there's one day, like, I'm so committed to this that even if I feel like shit and I'm just Laura, I'm just going to show up in my PJs. And because that's what makes it even more real, right? Like, we don't always feel like, oh my God, I want to dress up. I don't. No, sometimes it's like you show up and you do it even though you feel like shit. And that's sometimes, and that is what having a business is all about as well.
Well,
It's,
that's freedom.
yeah,
It's just like, this is me.
yeah,
Don't
yeah.
let me start saying, I almost started to sing the song. But yeah, like, this is me. Like, we get to just freely be ourselves.
Don't get me started.
This is me. Da, 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 da. Okay. So on that note, guys, keep your eyes peeled, because we are going to be launching that on Tuesday, the 28th.
28th.
And both of us are always available to receive your reflections, what comes up within you, questions that these episodes generate within you, or that this live generates within you. And most importantly, just be present with what kind of comes into your awareness and what you become aware of within your own field. When you listen to this, when you listen to those episodes, it's more important than the conscious content that we're talking about, right? Because as you start to, because you're going to have your own unique response and your own unique sensations that kind of come up through this. And that's the point. That's the point, is for you to be able to kind of feel into what this feels like for you. So thank you for being here. And thank you, Anna.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm really excited for this. I cannot wait. It's like, dream coming true.
Me too. It's
So
so fun.
yeah, anything that you all, of course, if you start listening to the podcast as well and are like, you know what, I would love to know about this. We are also open to, answering your questions on our
Mhm.
podcast. So feel free to send me or Laura a message. We're super open, and, we would love to support you in any way that we can so that you can get on your own freedom frequency, whatever that frequency looks like.
Nice ending. Solid. All right, friends, we will see you very, very soon. Have a fabulous day and keep your eyes peeled for the freedom frequency. Bye.
Bye.